never really wanted to be anywhere else, I suppose. You sort of look around at the stands in the stadium and you sort of think, yeah, it's a proper football club. Every season I just kept building this team, this squad. I actually had a philosophy with them as well. I made sure that they played football, and I sort of thought, you know what, this is quite magical, this. I would never bawl and shout unless the players really needed it, you know, and then if I was shouting, they knew they'd done something wrong. I ended up winning the Premier League and then the European Cup, and now I'm 50 years in. 85 years old I am. 85. It's quite emotional, actually. Doesn't feel real somehow.
This is all about obsession, delusion, and general idiocy from a bloke who should know a lot better, but clearly doesn't really. I don't know if you ever tried to explain it to people who maybe don't know what it is. It sounds a bit weird, to be honest. You know, you're sort of talking to people going, well, it's a video game where you play it on your laptop, and your job is obviously, rather unsurprisingly, to be the manager of a football team.
You can read a book in a couple of days and be in that universe, but you can't affect anything. Whereas with Football Manager, every single thing you do affects everything in the universe.
It's more than a game, innit? It's like a religion or something.
It's always just one more game. If you lose, it's not enough. You can't leave it on that note. If you win, you've got to keep it going. You can't leave it.
It's all football admin, that's what it is, you know, and it's strange because I don't really enjoy doing my own admin, yet here I am spending hours and hours of my life simulating the administrative duties of somebody else.
This is a familiar scene, one that is replicated the world over. And whilst the protagonists may change and the locations may differ, the goal always remains the same.
What are you guys doing? What are you doing? No! Get on him! Get him! Don't let him go past you! What are you doing, man? You are useless!
There is no end to this scene. The late nights, the studious application of a plan. But then, there is no end to Football Manager.
Brilliant! Move forward, forward, forward! Oh, man! Oh! Don't dive into tackles!
For in the player's mind, they are all but a few clicks from glory.
Yeah!
A couple of signings away from creating a squad to conquer the world.
Yes! Ah! Oh! Yes! Yes!
They are in charge.
Yes!
They set the agenda.
Yes!
They are the manager.
I don't know about you, but I wouldn't personally play a video game called Office Manager if one existed, where you're in charge of a small independent office maybe, and your job is to obviously restock staplers and maintain photocopiers and negotiate Brenda's pay rise, because there's been a little news item come through that, you know, she's been making noises about wanting a new challenge, and DHL have apparently been sniffing around. I think it's safe to say the best we could hope for an office manager is getting a little wonder kid who's a work experience lad coming in who's been dubbed the new Bill Gates. That's the best we could hope for then.
This is a story of how Football Manager has grown to become an integral part of football culture.
We know more about the players our clubs are signing. It's harder to pull the wool over fans' eyes, and that's partly because of Football Manager.
How it has created a worldwide database of players that has become so accurate it's used within the game.
You spot them early on and you can see he's going to develop into a star, and you can buy him as a 16, 17-year-old. And then later on in real life, you just actually see them players. That's nice.
How it has enchanted the lives of millions worldwide.
If I had nothing else to do or no other distractions, I mean, I could play that game all day.
Including the players and managers who make up the game.
I can imagine that every manager worth his salt will be using it.
To get started, turn the computer on. Now type in the word load and press the Enter key. The computer responds with an instruction to press the play button.
The 90s, a technological revolution, A world where the megabyte was a catalyst for change and football was on the cusp of a metamorphosis.
It was the embryonic days of the Premier League in the early 90s. It was popular, more popular than it had been during the 80s, but it still wasn't anything like it is now. Footballers were still, for the most part, earning sums of money that weren't that far away from, you know, what your parents would be earning. So it was an altogether more normal experience.
It was to be television that would shift the public perception of the game. Football had hit the big time. Satellite TV money had bootstrapped it into the modern world, and the modern world demanded entertainment.
If you think back to 1992, it was 2 years after Italia 90, where we'd had this amazing rise of the English football team, Gazza's tears. There was a kind of suddenly a glamour around and an excitement around football that we'd not had. The late 80s was a period of kind of doldrums for football. We'd had a series of stadium disasters. There was a problem with hooliganism, and suddenly in the early 90s, like, football exploded as a kind of legitimate family entertainment.
The elements for Genesis were in existence, and in their bedroom in Shropshire, brothers Paul and Ov Collier had been studiously developing an alpha copy of a different type of football game, one that placed the player in the hot seat. Miles Jacobson joined the team a couple of years later, and together they would go on to change the landscape of football gaming.
If you go back to when we first started playing these types of games, Football Manager games, in about 1981 or 82, we felt that we could do something ourselves that was kind of in the same...
They were pretty simplistic, weren't they? They were limited, and you felt that you wanted a more immersive kind of game. We thought, well, this isn't right. You got to why not create a world and put the person in it, and then you've got a real game. You've got a real simulation and a game that will actually carry on without you.
You were kind of the centre of the universe in the early games, and we wanted something where you were part of the universe, and the universe was the football world. And that was our core philosophy from the start.
It was certainly very noticeable as someone playing the first game. There was that wow factor of going, how I'm playing against this team and I can actually see who the players are, and I can get a scout report telling me about their info.
In fact, the other matches were actually taking place between teams that weren't yours, and you could go and look at the results and click or whatever on the result and get a report and the ratings of all the players. I think we just felt that was a better way to do it.
And then we sort of get into the point where we're playing it with our friends and everyone's having a great Saturday afternoon playing it and getting very competitive, and then it's time to start thinking, what can we do with this,
The Colliers had this idea, worked on it alone or in their bedroom, sent out letters to 20 or so publishers to try and get them interested in the game, and got turned down by everybody. I'm sure they've still got the rejection letter they got from Electronic Arts, which said, "No, I'm sorry, this idea is not going to work." It's kind of like a Hollywood story, but with two kind of unglamorous guys rather than Brad Pitt.
The game eventually did get taken up. Domark published the Colliers' work. Championship Manager was to be its name, a text-based simulation released on the Commodore Amiga and Atari ST. The game allowed players to play in all 4 divisions of the English leagues, made up of imaginary players.
First game came out in 1993, all right, and I worked out I'd played every single version, OK? So, age 34 and a half, I'm classing this as my midlife crisis show, right? It's breaking point now, right? So, 20 years I've been playing this game, right? Which is a ridiculous amount of time. Obviously, I was at school at 13, 14. Also, my parents got divorced at that time as well, so when my mum was sort of having the tears and that, I would go upstairs and sort of go on the computer, and she knew I wasn't looking at pornography. She knew I was looking for wing-backs, right? So, safe up there, because let's face it, if I've played 20 years worth of Football Manager, I have not been sexually active for 20 years, have I?
Championship Manager 2 would take it to another level. Real players and detailed stats, it quickly became the stuff of legend. Then, in early 2004, things changed. The team the Colliers and Miles had built, now called Sports Interactive, moved to a new publisher, Sega, leaving their old Championship Manager name behind to become Football Manager. Crucially, they took the code and the database with them.
I remember the first concerted attempt to get mass research going was the fanzines. We basically we wrote to all the fanzines sent them a sheet and said, could you rate your players, please?
The first version, I would say we've made educated guesses about the attributes of the top division players.
Yes.
We didn't plan for the database to be any particular size. It was just literally, this is the game we have, this is the leagues we're simulating, and we need a database. So As the game grew, we simulated more leagues, we obviously needed to expand the database, and I guess the whole thing's become out of control because, you know, we've had people wanting this league, wanting that league, and we've expanded it so much that you need the huge database. So it's just a necessity, really. We didn't sort of think, oh, we're going to end up with this huge database. It's just happened.
All of the artificial intelligence couldn't exist if it wasn't for the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of different character types that we have in the game because of the data.
Right from the beginning, the Collier brothers were absolutely obsessed with detail. It was an intricately detailed game, even before they had the scouting network, which they eventually put in place, where, you know, hundreds of fans around the world got together and started actually scouting teams and coming up with really realistic, authentic stats. And that kind of matched the desire of football supporters to have something which made them feel as though they were kind of involved with the game.
The Scouting Network, an integral part of any football club, an integral part of Football Manager. And much like football, the game spends countless hours scouting teams and players. Except they are making sure that everything is accurate rather than just scouting for talent.
Growing up in South Africa at the time, we only really had English football, and it was a rare game on television. The only team I used to watch back then was Liverpool, because Bruce Grobbelaar was born in Durban, so there was this natural affinity for them. Being a white boy in Africa, I came from a rugby cricket culture, but I got introduced to the game because of cricket, actually. My brother was playing cricket at St George's Park in Port Elizabeth, and one of the groundsmen the one day said to me, "Listen, they're playing soccer the next day, and why don't I come watch?" And I got to see Joe Masono play live. I'd never seen anything like it. He did things with the ball I didn't know was possible. And I think, like any sportsman, if you see one of the greats as a kid, that's how you fall in love with the game. I spent my life in football, writing and editing. For the past 4 or 5 years, I've been happily doing the South African research. I still focus on the local game, and with Football Manager researching, it's like I'm always out there trying to discover those guys I fell in love with when I was a kid, trying to find the new ones. Every now and then we have a young player that I just want to keep track of, you know, to see what happens in his career. We're at Vasco da Gama in Cape Town. It's good to come to training because you get to see whether they can show that potential skill that they have. There's nothing wrong with seeing these guys in this environment. It's certainly going to add to the data collected. We actually had one Nigerian guy recently signed in South Africa who kept saying he's 21 years old. But his entire professional career is on record. You know, he played in France at this age, and he played in Nigeria for 3 years before that, which would have made him 12. And they've never had a 12-year-old professional in the Nigerian Premier League. It's why we have to keep records, because you can't be 21 your entire career.
Football Manager's Scouting Network is worldwide. And in its home country, there is a researcher for every club.
I'm a researcher with SI. I was also a professional scout for 5 years, and I've worked for SI on and off for about 10 years. I remember being at games using Football Manager to check a player's attributes at half-time, and other scouts coming across to ask me, you know, how did I know all this information about the player? Where did I get it all? And saying that, you know, it was just something I'd thrown together, but in fact it was just a game. In terms of being algorithmic database, it's unsurpassed and unsurpassable. I don't think there's any other resource that will allow you to search for a left-footed goalkeeper that's under 5'3" and can also play right back and isn't friends with Ryan Giggs. It would be impossible, but you can do that on Football Manager. We're here today to take a look at some of Derby County's players, in particular Will Hughes, one of their most important playmakers.
Me and my mate used to stay up till God knows what time in the morning, 4 or 5, for days on end just playing it. I think it's the realism of it. I think how in-depth it is and to what extremes you can go to relates so much to the real game nowadays, and I think that's what I and many other football fans love.
I've heard of players having it written into their contractual clauses written in so that they can play Football Manager on the coach, on the way to games.
You get drawn to it that much that it becomes part of what you do, especially when you're playing it a lot and when you're travelling down 2 or 3 hours. You can find yourself playing it on the coach for most of the way.
So we're going to be assessing Will for the new Football Manager game. Later I will be updating his histories and his statistics and things like that, but in particular today I'm looking at his attributes and to see how far he's progressed since last year.
I'll just look at them here. Some of them are quite generous. It's like pace, I'm 13. I'll take that all day long.
There are 1,300 researchers in the world, all checking, all measuring, all ensuring that the information within the game is accurate. It's the database that makes the dreams seem real.
Became aware of the game mid-90s. We've been playing this other game where you used to post it off to Chesterfield, and they'd like write back and tell you what happened in your match, and we used to do that for like a couple of years. And then suddenly footy managers come and it's like, it's all happening in front of you. It was like a revelation. We got into it dead early in 6 weeks holidays, maybe 95, could have been 96. We just hammered it solid, 6 weeks holidays, that were it, gone. Didn't want to go to Skegness, none of that business this year. We're playing on footy manager. Our Chelsea, yeah, took over Viali's job. We used to have to like invent a we used to, we still do. We have to invent a backstory. You can't just bit manager. You've got to like have a reason why, like, oh yeah, I used to play for Wednesday, then I moved to Chelsea in the 80s, and would you like invent a backstory for yourself to like make it a bit more realistic and that, you know what I mean? Now we're Chelsea, I won title on last day with Mark Hughes header at Newcastle. Massive. Still think about it now. The thing I like about the game is it's all encompassing, innit? There's no like, it's not like something you dip into. It just takes over your life. Like, I'm a musician, I remember like playing Glastonbury, right? First time I'm playing Glastonbury, there's gonna be like thousands of people. I'm like backstage like, I need a new right winger for Man U. You know what I mean? One of them? Like, mental, innit? I'll show you physically how I approach the game, right? So like, I'm married, right? So like, Laura gets in bed, she falls asleep before me, right? So I'm like here, right, like this. Like laptop on belly. She's asleep, bum on leg. Get her bum on my leg, so she's facing that way. Like, I always like turn her over, you know, so she won't like I've had a couple of weird incidents where she's like turned over in middle at night. You know, like when they kick the legs off, it's bosh, knock me game flying, disastrous. Worst bit is though, you know, if you've been listening to music, 'cause I play it on silent, right? You know, if you've been listening to music but you forgot you've listened to music, and you're like laid in bed at night and everything's dead quiet, just having a little sneaky game and it comes on. Rah! Oh, terrible, innit? You have to like snap me. It's like being caught watching porn by your mum, innit? It's like, sorry babe. I've woke her up a few times, it's grim. Let me get back up. Shouldn't be down here really, should I? But yeah, that's physically how I play. That's my vibe, is like flat on my back, laptop on belly, bosh. But like one time I had this game on Man U, right? I've signed a right side. I've got like a proper side together. Like, I'm unbeatable. I've won Champions League final in like a 4-3 thriller. You know what I mean? I'm losing, I've come back, I've won. I've gone nuts. I've like lost me go get him, Babby. All that. Proper woke Mrs up. She's got something important to do next day. Doghouse.
Because I tried to work out, like, how long of my life I'd actually spent playing this game. For example, if I'd spent 1 hour of every day over 20 years, right, this would equate to 7,300 hours of my life, right? Now, I know, fella, you're thinking there's 20 years, there's 5 leap years, where's those other 5 hours? Don't worry, they're in there as well, right? Accuracy 20 now, innit? Yeah, right, so... but that's not possible. That's not possible. Everyone in this room who's played Football Manager knows it's not possible to only play for 1 hour a day, right? 1 hour on Football Manager is barely long enough to meet your staff and players for the first time. Maybe a more realistic time frame would be maybe 3 hours a day, right? Now, if we take 7,305 hours, we multiply that by 3, that comes out at 21,915 hours. I know, how depressing is that, right? It gets worse when you divide it by 24, the number of hours obviously in every day, it comes out at a rather alarming and depressing 2.5 years of my life, right? Yeah. 2.5 years, right? I could have got my coaching badges in 2.5 years. Like, I could have learnt a second language. That would have been helpful, you know. Rosetta Stone reckon it only takes 96 hours on average to learn a second language. That would have been really useful. I could have gone and managed in a different country and everything then.
We were about a year away from getting married, and we were looking at honeymoon locations. And at the same time, I just started beta testing the 2008 version of Football Manager. The English leagues were all taken, so they needed somebody to test the Bulgarian league. I found a team in the lowest league available called Nesipar, so I started playing with them, enjoying testing with them and getting into the game. And I started really looking into the actual team themselves in real life and found they're based on the east coast of Bulgaria, near a Black Sea holiday resort called Sunny Beach. And I thought, I wonder if it's possible to sort of like get there. So I mentioned this to Faye, and she said, OK, let's have a look. So we decided that was going to be our honeymoon, and it was also going to be my first time actually going abroad on a holiday. I was really determined to try and get to see the team, you know, put so much effort into finding out about them and playing them in Football Manager. I thought, how am I going to do this? It took a bit of sort of like working out, trying to think logistics behind it. And things just panned out perfectly, really, because we made friends with other English holidaymakers out there, and the wives and sort of like girlfriends all sort of like decided one day they're going to go off together. And I, you know, went with the lads and said, you know, I've got an idea for us. Fancy going to go and watch some local football. And there we were watching Nesipar playing the Bulgarian second division. You know, the wife at the time didn't know. She knew we were going to football, and it was all because of Football Manager, really, that we were there.
For the uninitiated, this behaviour is very strange indeed. Why would a player construct a life based on a bunch of stats? And why did the early versions of the game attract so many, despite being graphically challenged?
You know when you used to get text back in the day? Like, they were all right, but you had to, like, use your imagination. I've got a good imagination, so that's fine.
I really miss the very old ones where it was a text report and your imagination had to fill in the gaps. There was something beautiful about that you pictured everything in your head, season in, season out.
I think I'm a bit sad in that respect, but I could watch teletext for hours and just wait for a digit to change and a goal scorer's name to come up. And that was what that version was like. That I think was my favourite. Probably caught me at just the right time. Sort of in between girlfriends and before pub.
There was a certain charm about the original versions, but times evolved, and thus it followed, so did the graphics.
I remember first playing it when there were little circles for players on the pitch.
Then the dots came out, best thing I've ever seen. Oh, because you can actually see who's played them on side now, so you know who to shout at. That was brilliant.
And then it went through stages of having kind of 3D images. You could watch a kind of real game.
As soon as they bought that 3D pitch business in, I were gone, me, sold, in love forever.
And now a new development, more realism to add to the simulation.
Today we're in Horsham at their motion capture facility, and we are capturing new motion capture data for inclusion in Football Manager 2015. We're using real professional players provided by AFC Wimbledon. Previously in the past we had hand animations, so those would have been created completely from scratch by hand. And we're now replacing that with real believable data from real footballers, real human motion, and that will add to the immersion and believability of the actual match engine itself. Good, 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 very nice. This is going to look good in the game, really good.
There's a lot of nuances that you pick up that people naturally do. I mean, every take is going to be an individual take because no one does the same thing twice. What we have here is we've got a 48 Vicon optical motion capture system, 48 cameras. Each one of those will pick up to 53 markers on each character, which identify the joints on a character and how they move.
So you're going right low first, Chase. Maybe one of you come out of there to hear a little bit more for these cameras. All right, let's go then. Great save, that's beautiful.
The volume that we use, which is the space that people work in, it's 11 by 12 metres, which gives us quite a nice size for people to be moving around in, running about, so they've got a lot of freedom.
This is more like, possible counter-attack. You might be about to throw the ball to a fullback.
That's then captured as basically a bunch of dots on the screen. What happens then is the software will join those dots together, create a skeleton, put that in place, and then in turn that skeleton is transferred onto a character within 3D software. An animator will do an animation pass on that, and then that goes straight into game. What they can gain from this is having a whole set of movements for one person, which will be different on the screen to a different player doing the same things.
Nice, really nice.
And it's these small little intricacies that we're trying to capture, basically. It's to give the game a bit of texture, really. It's just to add these little minute details that fans will hopefully pick up on. Because a floated in cross will look a lot different to a cross that's drilled into the box, basically.
You're straight, though. I'd say float it a little bit more on the next one.
The difference is more than we even imagined before we started. It's obviously the first time that we've worked with professional players, and the gulf in technical class and execution of the actions is enormous. And that's going to have a really, really big impact on Football Manager and the animations in the game.
Good save.
The game, like football itself, has constantly evolved. For some, it's a second job, whilst for others, the handheld or classic versions allows them to fit in their football management responsibilities around a busy lifestyle. It's come a long way from a text-only simulation.
The atmosphere at football, particularly when you're 7, 8 years old and you're growing up, there's nothing like it. Vicarage Road is a really special place to me. I've spent so much of my time there. I've been going to Watford now for 35 years, so it's a place that's full of emotion. Lots of highs, lots of lows, but mainly highs. Maybe because I wasn't as good at the game as I wanted to be, but my brain knew what should be going on. That's why I started studying the tactical side of things, and also playing a lot of the games that I did at the time. Playing the original Football Manager made me more interested in that element. Managers do all manage in different ways, so we have to reflect that in the game. The tracksuit versus more suited manager. There are some managers who are down on the training ground who are literally running the training session, whereas there are other managers who are a bit more hands-off, who give directions to the coaches of what they want the coaches to do. You okay?
Yeah.
I like to learn more about what's going on, and it is important for my work. I've been fortunate enough to go to team meetings, learn a lot more about the terminology that's used, and that kind of stuff does end up making it into the game. Things like the player roles, for example. There was a time where, if you went into the post-training team meeting, there'd be 2 boards there, one of them for with ball, one of them without ball, and some clubs probably still do that. But I've learned from being at training that player roles have become so much more prevalent now, and it's the same inside the game. The player role does tell you what the player is going to do with the ball and when they don't have the ball. It's amazing the access that we get, not just from watching the training and learning what goes on during the sessions, because even just working on set pieces like they are now means that I can go back and talk to the guys who do the set piece creator inside the game about what we're doing, go back and talk to the match team about the way that things are being done. For example, just there you saw the team that are attacking the ball running back and running forward, which isn't something that we've got in the game at the moment, and that's something that could go in the future. I don't think that people form an emotional bond with the game itself, but they do form an emotional bond with the team and with the players. I believe that the relationship that people have with their own team inside Football Manager can actually be greater than the relationship that they have in real life.
Basically, I was in the cup final. It was a big deal to me. I'd not been in a cup final before. This was exciting to me. I thought, you know, I might as well get as immersed in the game as I could. So I had the sound of the stadium filling the room, and I thought it's going to feel like a real match. So I decided to play it as a real match. It was going to be the full 90 minutes. It just felt like being an actual football manager for the night. So I thought, you know, I'll commit to it. I'll go in two-footed on it. And then I thought, well, if you're going to be in that kind of environment, you'd probably wear a suit, wouldn't you? Because, I mean, you're the manager after all. And the game was predictably quite an exciting one. There was thrills, spills. They scored. Why? And we scored. Yes! And I was going through the full gamut of emotion. You know, I wasn't really holding anything back. I was yelling at the little dots to, you know, do things I'd told them to do before. 6 weeks you work on these things and training, and looking back at it now, it seems silly, but at the time it was probably the most fun I've ever had. Shoot, hit it! Oh! Yes! With about 10 minutes to go in the match, there was a knock at the door which sort of brought me back to reality. And when I went to open the door, the blue light just made its way in to the room, and there was 2 policemen flanking my next door neighbour either side, and they were just making sure and I wasn't being robbed or burgled or assaulted. You had to stand there in front of 2 policemen and explain in pretty much this amount of detail that there was nothing wrong, I wasn't in any immediate danger, I was just getting really overexcited playing in a cup final on Football Manager, which was probably one of the most sobering moments of my life. Then, of course, there's the way I explain that to people who play Football Manager, which is just, yeah, cup final, wore a suit, full game, got excited, police were called, and they're always like, oh, yeah, I can understand that, yeah, see how that happens.
I've never suited personally. My brother's suited. My funniest one, I know a fella called Dan the Man, right, lives in Nottingham. Now, this geezer's like 50-odd-year-old, right? He's got 4 kids, pretty respectable fella, Liverpool fan, right? He's got Liverpool to the cup final, suited and booted. Weirdly, though, he's playing it early hours at morning, like 4:30 in the morning. He's got Liverpool to the cup final. They've had a drought trophy-wise, Liverpool. It's a big moment for him, so he's put suit on. He's even got himself a little, like, flower, right? His missus has come into the room, and he's, like, proper suited and booted and that. Like, how'd you explain it? Looks weird, doesn't it? Looks like you're having an affair or, like, you've got some weird thing going on. Like, I don't think people understand.
Some guys really take playing the game to a whole new level. Now, it's become something of a cliche to put on your very best suit for a cup final. I've done that myself, and with great success. But some people took it even further than that. There was one guy who was actually shaking hands with the doorknob, pretending it was Princess Michael of Kent, and he was introducing his team. There was another guy in a really worrying development who, before an away trip to Istanbul, opened his bedroom window and set the wastepaper bin on fire, just to really create the right atmosphere.
This is Croft Park, home of Blythe Spartans. Brings back a lot of memories. The best one must have been the Champions League final. I mean, how they reclassified this as a UEFA Category A stadium, you know, big club privileges, I suppose, you know. I remember it clear as day. I mean, you can imagine this on a European night. This is going to be rocking, OK? So I remember the 3rd goal. That was the one that sealed it, OK? We're 2-0 up, we're playing Valencia. There's a little sort of different coloured bit of grass. We had that deliberately put there because that was where the right winger was going to cut in. He then pulled it straight back to Milos Djordjevic, who's a Serbian centre-forward I had. Absolutely clinical he was. He moves 20, 25 yards from goal, arrows it right into the top corner. Everyone goes absolutely nuts. The big screen is flashing. It's goal, it's goal, it's goal, it's 3-0. We're going to be the European champions for the first time ever. That's the moment that you dream of, isn't it? You know, that's the Champions League. That's the goal that wins you the first European Cup, and what a night, what a night. We won the Champions League, and I thought, this is amazing, right? This is genuinely fantastic. The best experience I've ever had in my life. The next day, I booked myself onto one of those city sightseeing buses they've got in Newcastle, and gave myself an open-top bus ride of the town to celebrate.
The obsession with reality is a common theme for the Football Manager player. To be real, you have to act real. But what about those who are real?
I have to say I've been into computer games and football computer games since I was 8 or 9.
But back in the old days, it was on the Commodore 64 when Football Manager came out. It's like proper football for me. I was 19 then. You could play 24 hours a day, more or less, when you didn't have training or school. I'm organizing my squad, trying to save a tactic here. It says 3-2-2-2-1, but I'll call it the 3-4-3. You know, when you're a professional footballer, you have loads of time spare. You travel a lot, so you're on the coach. You stay away in hotels the night before a game, and you need to be able to fill your spare time. Me and Jordi Cruyff played a lot against each other, and he got me into the Spanish league and all those players, while I was more into the English league, because that's always been my interest. But me and Jordi spent hours and hours on end. You can ask our wives or girlfriends at the time. They weren't happy with us. I always bought myself whenever I had a chance. When I had the money to, and Man United let me go. Not very often.
Players, then, are as obsessed as any other fan. And over in Italy, there was one who wanted to take his involvement to another level. He is Demetrio Albertini, AC Milan and Italian legend.
Nel momento in cui ho comprato il gioco, quindi si vedeva un po' tutte le spiegazioni, che quindi vedevi che c'erano i ricercatori. A quel punto lì abbiamo avuto il contatto con i dirigenti di Football Manager, gli sviluppatori di Football Manager Italia. Quando hanno saputo che ero io, Demetrio Albertini, il calciatore del Milan, ci hanno inserito direttamente, e a quel punto tutte le varie caratteristiche potevano essere più simili alla realtà dette da un giocatore all'interno della propria squadra.
Albertini was involved in the game, and the game became integral to his teams. The Italian national side, multiple World Cup winners, cult heroes, Football Manager players.
Il Trapp era l'allenatore insieme ai suoi collaboratori. E in più in quegli anni eravamo in tanti, c'era Pirlo che giocava, c'era Massimo Oddo. In quegli anni quasi tutta la squadra giocava a Football Manager, e in quel momento lì abbiamo trasferito un po' tutti anche agli allenatori in seconda quello che poteva essere le caratteristiche degli avversari, proprio perché le caratteristiche sono verosimilmente quasi uguali alla realtà.
The realism of the game was making a tangible impact within football, scouting teams, researching players. But what about influencing signings? Could a computer game really arm a real-life manager with the information he needed to buy a player?
Rangers are a fantastic institution, beautiful stadium. When I took the job over, you don't know what it's all about until you actually experience an old firm game. It was mind-blowing.
If I was starting a new game, I always went for the tried and trusted players that had served me well in the other clubs. I suppose otherwise, take the job that my dad was currently in. So Rangers appoint John McLeish as manager. So that means you've been sacked.
Thank you.
So I was living in Glasgow at the time, and I think it was about 2001-2002 season. And I used to like Barcelona because I always knew the B team and the C teams had great gems that you could pluck, maybe for a bargain or get them on loan. And then this one kid stood out, you know, I was drafting him into the first team already and giving him a few games, and he'd score a couple of goals, and I think he must have been 13 or 14, and his stats for someone that age was just incredible. First thing I did was tell my dad about it.
He told me that this guy is going to be the best player in the world. And I said, yeah, okay, son, you know, pat in the head and let them go on with it, you know.
Back in the early days of the game, there was some players that you felt maybe weren't incredibly realistic to real life in terms of where their careers ended up. But this just felt like there was something different about this kid. You know, why was he in at 13? Surely they couldn't have made this mistake. And yeah, the kid was called Lionel Messi.
For them to actually say this is the guy who's going to be the best player in the world, then that happens. You know, I made them my chief scouts right away, my two boys.
Fun enough, 2-3 years later, Rangers inquired about signing Messi on loan, and another player that I'd seen from the game that I'd recommended to my dad.
I said to Jan Bouter's phone 10-cat and see Barcelona, have we got any kids coming through? We actually asked if Leo Messi was available on loan, and they said no chance. He did say, though, that Iniesta could come on loan. So he told us that Iniesta, this boy, was very lightweight, but nobody could get near him on the pitch. He was playing in the Barcelona B team, and then hit 10-cat phone back on the Monday and says, can't do it. He played in the first team at the weekend, and the coach is going to take him into the first team squad. So it was a near miss, but the kids flagged these up when they were like 14.
I think at the time, you know, being a kid, he laughed and thought, oh, this is just a computer game, but I think I was the one that was right in the end.
Scotland may have missed out on Messi, but it does host a star of a different kind. He is the stuff of legend, part of a select group that excite every player. The unheard-of gems that reside inside each copy of the game as laconic talents, but are nurtured into heroes by each loving click by click of the mouse. Most, like Messi, will become heroes in real life, but some end up having more success in the virtual world.
Mark Kerr, what a player. He just became the pivot upon which the whole of your squad could be based. He was the man who never, ever let you down.
Built my title-winning Juventus team around him. Him and Edgar Davids in the centre of midfield. He's travelled, hasn't he?
A genius player in the game. He's still playing these days at Queen of the South.
The best £40,000 you would ever spend, right? It's Scotland's Mark Kerr. He was a diamond in the game, right? Oh, brilliant. You bought him, right? You bought him. He was the Claude Makelele role before Claude Makelele was invented.
I started off just at a local team, just to get involved in that with some friends, and my dad was involved in that. I moved into Glasgow, into Celtic, played there for about 5 years, which was a good experience as a kid growing up. So I was lucky enough to get took on by Falkirk. I managed to get training with the first team pretty early on, and I got into the team just before the end of my first season, really. I just started to play, and I hardly really had made a name for myself in the game of football, like in real terms, and then the football manager was kind of coming into the club. I had done a couple of things around about 2001, a couple of interviews and things on rise of the game and me, how good I'd done in the game, kind of thing.
The funny thing about Mark Kerr was that it wasn't that any of his stats were particularly amazing. He didn't have the best shot in the game, he wasn't the quickest player in the game. It was his work rate and determination, his ability to follow orders.
I was Falkirk, that's when I first started. Falkirk, yeah. It was probably about maybe 3-4 years after I left Falkirk. It was kind of, I think the game got bigger, and then I had kind of stayed as like one of the best players in it.
He used to go sign for Arsenal, for the Real Madrids of this world, for Juventus. He was always the captain of Scotland. You know, I'm sure Mark would have loved that to be reality, but within the game, I know he was a real legend.
The boy Kevin Bridges, I think he does an interview and he says he won the Champions League final with Dortmund and I scored the goal. It's pretty cool, but it would be better if I had done it in real life, I suppose, to match it.
There's them fellas in who they never make it in real life, but in footy manager terms, they're gods, aren't they? Tonton Zola. I've never seen what he looks like. I'm going to Google him right now. Where's my phone? Today, I want to know.
I think my favourite was Tonton Zola Moukoko, who was obviously the legend of the game for a number of years. If you had him in your side, your side was virtually unbeatable.
You could plot this guy, I think it was maybe from Djurgårdens in Sweden, for about £20,000-35,000, and no matter what club you put him at, he would score a hat-trick, 4 goals, 5 goals. Within 2 seasons, he was probably the best player in the game.
I remember back in the day, it was all about Freddie Adu. Everybody, if you had Adu, you were jamming. But now, Adu never really. It's, you know, when you see somebody that never lived up to the football manager potential, Yeah, he kind of disappeared.
No one will ever replace Mike Duff in my affections. He was in one about 12 years ago. He cost £20,000 from Cheltenham Town. You could throw him in the Manchester United team, you could throw him in the Southend United team, he would be the best player. He was the greatest bargain that game has ever seen, and I can't tell you how happy I am to see that even in real life, though he hasn't quite matched that, he is now back in the Premier League with Burnley.
To me, I see those players as mistakes. They're data errors. They're things that should never have happened. I'm not cruel enough to want to take those memories away from the people who love those players. And, you know, I've got a big soft spot for Mark Kerr as well. He did very well for my Watford team for many years. Was the player that you could afford to buy. But then on the other hand, as the game's director, I see them as negatives because they're not true to the simulation that the game is meant to be and is what we want the game to be.
People message me all the time saying, you're far too good, you're an FM god and stuff like that. There's been a book recently. Obviously the players in that were all the players I signed as a kid. With the stuff I'm getting on Twitter, I can half expect myself to be in that book soon with the way that it's going on. And people are obviously sending me references saying I'm getting 26 in 27 and stuff like that. So it's great to see that my players doing well for them. I try and sign myself, but I've been let down, if I'm honest. It happened where it weren't doing well enough for my standards, and I ended up just being there because I was a manager and I didn't like that. You know what I mean? It's easy to have that little click chat you dropped on air and tell myself that I've been dropped.
I always seem to sign myself as the years go on. I've got more expensive, so it's been difficult. I bought myself for PSG. I bought myself for 25 million, I think, and then didn't cut it because obviously I had Rodriguez, Bale and Di Maria, all those sort of players. Didn't cut it, and then I sold myself for 10 million after one season. So I'm ruthless as well, if I need to be.
I don't even know why, but I'd have to dominate the Italian league and win the Champions League maybe 5 or 6 times. And then I'd probably work in the conference. Got one at the moment, Staley Bridge from Conference North, and we're top half. Premiership tied at the minute, third season in the Premier League, and we're just trying to push on from there, but it's making it hard for us because the chairman's not that willing.
When we're on the plane, like we're always on Football Manager. We're always looking over each other's results. We're always celebrating when the other team scores, and so yeah, it's definitely a lot of rivalry. I think that 2 of my teammates are Spurs, and I've obviously gone for PSG because I like just spending money.
I've punched the screen many times when the results are not going right, and obviously it does happen in games where you batter a team all game, they go up the other end and score in the last minute. Yeah, the laptop's got a few right hooks from me and a few straights. It's just one of them things that happens, doesn't it, in football, and obviously it happens in the game because it's probably the best replication of that.
I don't think we ever consciously said we're going to tap into this everyone wants to be a football manager thing. I think it was just that we...
That was the kind of thing we realised afterwards, wasn't it? Yeah, I think we wanted to be. But...
Yeah, exactly. We did it for ourselves to be and our mates, and then it just turned out that we were quite normal.
The game is more than just man management. It is a test of skill, a tactical masterclass.
My management style was 4-1-3-2, attacking with the full-backs pushing up and the right and left midfielders pushing up to support as well.
You know, a lot of the time I find myself trying to retrain an attacking midfielder, you know, as a centre midfielder, because I don't play with anybody in behind the strikers. I'll just play with a false 9.
I'm very attacking, as you know, from my playing style. I don't have too much emphasis on defence. At the moment, I play a 3-5-2. But the 2 wingers are high up the pitch, so it's more like a 3-3-4 and just go out and all-out attack.
I like to start off the 4-4-2, but with one midfielder kind of sat back more defensive, and then one target man striker and a faster striker who can play off a target man.
I generally like to have a very defensive-minded player here, almost a Makelele role, sometimes a centre-back actually in front, and that would give a lot of structure for the rest of the team to bomb on.
4 at the back, 1 defensive midfielder, 2 central midfielders, 2 wingers, 1 striker.
Following football is quite a geeky pastime. You know, the amount of knowledge we have about irrelevant players and irrelevant stats and irrelevant goals going back decades. You know, if it was anything else apart from football, if it was train spotting or something, people consider you, a massive geek. So it's perfect that the Football Manager appeals to that demographic, I think.
What the game did was give people a certain empathy with what football managers were going through.
It never ceases to amaze me when I see fans talking about players in other countries, and having really good knowledge. So I know where that influence has come from.
Football Manager's brought out a whole new vocabulary that I never knew existed. It's like, oh, I know defenders are there and I know midfielders are there, but are we playing an enganche? I don't know what one is.
Remember when Newcastle signed Tiote and nobody heard of him? Like, lad, absolutely fantastic regista, you'll blow your mind. He's a what?
Like the Makalele role.
There's no question that fans now, because of games like Football Manager, they're more familiar with tactics. They seem more approachable, more kind of accessible than they ever used to. You understand the choices of systems. You understand the changes that are being made more. It's all added to our knowledge of the game.
Yeah, I think it's a two-way street. People want more knowledge to help them play Football Manager, to help them sign good young players or use very intelligent tactics. And it happens the other way around. I think the knowledge you get from Football Manager means you're maybe more interested in the tactical side of things. Maybe you know more about foreign leagues. So I think it's cyclical, really.
I think Football Manager has given people an understanding of the intricacies of football that they never would have had before. And I'm sure football commentators must play the game.
I first played Football Manager as what was I, 11, 12, early teens maybe. Probably one of its first incarnations, and I absolutely loved it. Whiled away the hours, well, wasted the hours you might say, instead of doing homework, and I loved that game. I always play as York City, team I support, my local club. It's not just for that reason though, it's because I think you've got to start at the bottom and work your way up. You don't start as Liverpool and start in the Premier League and have everything there on a plate and be able to go out and sign somebody for £30 million. No. You've got to start by building something yourself. The feeling of accomplishment as you go up the leagues, I'm sure, if I was better at it, would be much more fulfilling. I'm sure that's the right way to play it as well. I find the game these days an aid and a hindrance. It's a good research tool in a way, but only once you start the game. You can't get into it too far because then it becomes a hindrance. I remember once getting very confused with Edgar Davids. It's a few years ago now, and he was a Juventus player, but I was absolutely convinced he was at Real Madrid. It didn't cause me any problems in a commentary because obviously when you start doing the preparation for a commentary, you do it properly, but if I just strolled to that game without doing any preparation, Champions League commentary as well, I would have been surprised to see Edgar Davids' name on the Juventus team sheet because I would have thought, well, he's at Real Madrid. No, he's not. Only in my kitchen.
Well, the thing is, Jeff, I think it was a good performance from the lads, to be honest. I mean, we went a goal down after 10 minutes. We were defending atrocious, really, first 10, 15 minutes. We could have been 3-0 down, but thankfully, the lads all stuck in. They're good at what they do. They've got a great team spirit in the camp, and, once we got the equaliser, I think it was only going to be one winner from there. And, the big lad at the top.
Let's get the training. Let's get the tactics together. This could even see if I had this, then I would be in trouble. I wouldn't get anything done. I'd be like, I wouldn't put the thing down. I'm a big football fan anyway, and I like to watch, even in my spare time, I watch Bundesliga football, I watch the Liga football, as well as the Premiership, and as well as, my team's Celtic, so, they're always they're the games I love to watch the most. But usually I'm Celtic, and I was managing Celtic at the time, and I got to go in, and they were kind enough on one of the occasions to invite me in, and I got to go into the dressing room. I got to meet the team, hang out. And there was one guy I never warmed to at all, and I couldn't figure out why. And it was, it turns out like I think he'd missed like training 3 weeks in a row in the game, and to the point where I had to go to the 2 weeks wage fine. And I was holding it against this poor guy in real life that his imaginary counterpart was lazy. No.
On May the 28th, 2002, we already knew that we'd lost the fight to stop Wimbledon FC relocating to Milton Keynes.
At the time, there were lots of rumours about clubs being bought and moved. There were a couple of clubs that were looking to move to Dublin, and we just thought that the whole thing was completely wrong. You can't buy a club and move them 20, 30, 40 miles away.
I was doing lots of TV and radio interviews because we announced on that day that we would start again. A lot of people in football were sceptical that fans could actually run a football club, and I think that I spoke quite passionately that day about how we could do this and how we would do this, and we were going to make it happen, even though we didn't have a ground, we didn't have a kit, we didn't have an official name, but we were going to make this happen.
So we heard Ivor Heller, the commercial director, talking on 5 Live when the decision had been made, and I gave him a call.
He said that he'd enjoyed listening to the interview and that he was inspired by what we were going to do. I said, good, let's get together and see what we can do, because it just had the right feel.
The first call to Ivor was literally to find out how much money they needed to set up the club, and we signed a deal a couple of days later.
The money in the early days was critical to us. There is no doubt about that, because we needed and have needed every penny that we've ever been able to raise.
The funniest thing when we first started working with them is they didn't actually have a kit, so for their first match they wore our Office 5-a-side kit.
We have always wanted to be part of the football community, and I don't think there is a better way to be part of the community than to be associated with Football Manager.
Football management is a totally strange and unique job, and I think unless you're sitting in the hot seat, you can't imagine what it's like. It's a pre-season friendly at the end of the day, so whatever happens, I'm not going to beat myself up or get down about it if they are too strong for us, which might be inevitable. I always wanted to play against the best, and I've got a study at home with photos of me playing against the best, and today I get to be in the opposite dugout against probably the best or one of the top 3 coaches in the world, which is fantastic.
We came from nothing, and then 9 years later we made it into the Football League. We're on the verge of a new ground back at Plough Lane.
Just prove that if you've got a good enough community and if the fans have the spirit, then you can come from nowhere and end up back playing in the Football League. It's proper Roy the Rover stuff.
The Wimbledon story resonates amongst football fans worldwide. This is real football. But the simulation has gone on to have a more widespread effect on the game. The database, so informative to its fans, now has a real-world impact, thanks to a deal with Prozone.
Now, anecdotally, we've heard over the years, of course, that football managers dip into Football Manager, the game's database, to kind of scout players. But this has kind of been legitimised now. It's all official.
The Prozone deal with Sports Interactive basically means that all of the knowledge that Sports Interactive have acquired over the last 20 years of producing Football Manager is available to clubs.
They've been talking to us for a while about their systems and about Recruiter and about what they were trying to do with the product, and then turned around and said that they needed our help, which was just bonkers.
The data provided has become part of Recruiter, a software package that clubs like Huddersfield Town can use to help scout players.
This is Huddersfield Town's 3rd season in the Championship. We have a good budget, but there's some clubs with significantly more money than us to spend, so we have to be intelligent in the marketplace.
We're one of the only teams in this league probably that's not been in the Premier League at some stage, so we've never had the parachute payments or the TV revenue. So when you've got teams who are able to spend £8 million, £11 million on strikers, our record transfer is just over £1 million. So, it does show what you're up against.
Recruiter is the programme developed by Prozone, which includes Sports Interactive's Football Manager data. And it enables clubs basically to do their due diligence on players. It's not the case that clubs will be signing players from Football Manager. They won't be opening up a game, seeing who stood in 2017 and thinking, right, we'll buy him. You can do everything you would need to do to scout a player, apart from the one crucial thing, and it will always be crucial, which is actually go and watch the player.
Prozone's Recruiter had 80,000 players in it, and the link with Sports Interactive has widened the net to include 250,000 players.
We provide all the biographical data before
a club steps over or a team steps over the white line, whereas Prozone provides all the analysis afterwards.
It just seemed such a simple partnership to come together, because they have such a vast experience of player database, and it just goes hand in hand with what we want to do in the professional space.
We have over 1,300 scouts worldwide. We're in a great position to provide that data, and clubs are looking further and further afield to try and find talent that's within their price range.
The analyst lads have flagged up a player in France. Yeah. So immediately I connect him with that player's agent, find out what's his value likely to be, what's his contract, what's his wages, is it worth our while following that player? If the answer to all that's yes, then we'll then send one of our guys from here, one of our senior guys, to France to watch that player.
The best thing for me and for the club is the fact we can really make it bespoke to us. So we input the indexes behind the data, all of which can be weighted, which gives us a real ability to fine-tune exactly what we're looking for. So we can see a set of players and names that nobody else is seeing.
The analytical staff can compare those player statistics and information, video footage and everything like that, and it can help the manager make a more informed decision as to which of the players we decide to recruit to Huddersfield Town.
We now do a search and we sit there and say, right, that's the exact sort of centre midfielder we want, and that's something that we take a lot of pride in.
It's not changed the way that we use the scouts, it's changed the way we make our decisions and the risks we can afford to eliminate. Scouting will always have a role in football, but the recruitment tool really supports everything that we try and do.
From our perspective, we've always been extremely proud of the database and the realism it reflects. So to have real football managers now using our data to bring in their big new signings, it's fantastic from our perspective.
I work on the Stephen Pienaar scale, I guess. If Stephen Pienaar is our most high-profile player that overseas guys will recognise, I'll work from then. I've seen Pienaar since he was at this School of Excellence, which was before he joined Ajax Cape Town, which is before he joined Ajax. So I can relate things to how he was. The easiest for me is always comparing to the player who's playing directly with them. As long as I get it right at the beginning, it should be pretty accurate. We're at the Athlone Stadium in Athlone in Cape Town. Tonight is a PSL match between Ajax Cape Town and Bidvest Wits. I'm keeping an eye on a couple of teenagers in the Ajax team. The Wits team is very well scouted. I think 3/4 of the team's 30 plus. So they've been in Football Manager for a decade or so. One or two of the Ajax kids, we obviously still monitoring them. There's Rivaldo Kutsia. Even the captain of Ajax Cape Town is young, 21, 22 years old. It's pretty much a team of development players that's come through the Ajax system. Rivaldo Kutsia, the number 3, has been doing his job pretty well so far. He's been marking number 11, Chris Katongo. He's a dangerous striker, and Rivaldo's been marking him out of the game. At 17, it's obviously hard to judge where he's going to go from here. But the truth is that there's a good chance he won't be in the PSL for more than 2 years. Ajax Cape Town are connected to Ajax Amsterdam, and they have already had a look at him. But of course, until he turns 18, he can't leave the country.
Wesley and go, behang, behang. He scores goals again and again. He scored 149 of them, and go, behang, behang. I think it's beautiful. I'm a worrying man. I took over the reins at Gateshead on Football Manager 2010. In dire need of a striker, I consulted my parent club at Newcastle, who had a man called Wesley Ngo Beheng in their reserves. I took him on loan for the season and he finished as top scorer. His contract ran out, so I tempted him back over the river on a full-time contract, and he stayed there for the next 10 years as we made our ascent up to the Premier League, and he scored in every single division along the way, which made him a bit of a cult hero at the club. When I say at the club, I just mean for me. I decided to buy a Gateshead shirt and then get his name and number printed on the back. So I had to contact the club secretary and arrange for them to send it off to their official club printers to add the name and number of a man that had never appeared for their club onto the back of the shirt. About 6 months after I last played that save, I got a bunch of notifications through on Twitter So I checked them, and it turns out that Gateshead had genuinely taken Wesley Ngobaheng on trial, but they didn't sign him, and the story ends there, sadly, for him. I did have a Wikipedia page that I'd edited for Wesley Ngobaheng to detail all his exploits while he was at Gateshead. They left it there for a good month or so, maybe 2 months, before they noticed that it featured apparently fictional information based in the future, which goes against their terms and conditions for articles.
What is reality? Is it using a computer game to help win your real-life match? Is it a top-flight manager who listens to his teenage son's advice? Or is it taking your virtual team success so seriously that you have to dress up for the occasion? In a way, all of these are real.
The football fan that our game caters to is the football fan who wants to be the manager. They're the person that, rather than going into the pub after the game and getting drunk and complaining about it, is actually sitting there going, well, if I was the manager, I would have brought an anchor man in the transfer window, and here's a list of 20 Chileans that we can be looking at.
That's the kind of common theme with football fans, isn't it? And I suppose our game gives these people the chance to try out their ideas and see if it's true.
I chatted to this guy and I says, how long have you played this game for? And he gave me the best answer to this question I've ever heard. He just looked me straight in the eye and went, I'm 5 years clean, mate. And I was like, that's wonderful, that's brilliant.
There's nothing quite like vanishing for 3 to 4 hours in this abstract universe, armed only with a notepad, a biro, a bag of mint imperials and a pot of tea.
It drives me mad that people do to kind of write it off as, oh, it's just a database. You know, it's just like looking at the novel Anna Karenina and just saying, oh, it's just a collection of words on a page.
It has honestly made me stop and think many, many times. No, I've got that wrong. Is that a game? Is that real? And that's just too many hours playing it.
You could stick me on a desert island. If I had me missus and Football Manager, I'd be all right. Need electricity, obviously.
It's a nice wee escape, you know. I think it's... That's a reason so many people love it, right?
It is made by football fans for football fans. It sounds cheesy, but we do make the game for ourselves.
I like it better than some people I know. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've got friends who, like, someone said, like, you can lose this friend, they'll, like, emigrate to New Zealand, or you can never play on Football Manager again. I'd send my friend to New Zealand.
I like anything with competition. I just love winning. Just having the control of the team and kind of guiding them, hopefully, to success, even though it's only a game. And hopefully prepare myself for one day when I do retire and I, fingers crossed, do it for real.
I know it's a game. I know it's a game, but you can't help but feel a little bit proud when it's a Champions League night in Blythe.
Oh, Jamie Cook, would you take a look at what you've done to my heart? There's always a reason for the change of seasons, but now my team has fallen apart. We were struggling out on the wing. Oh, then you came in to show how it was done. In your wide free roll, you scored so many goals. And oh, sweet Jesus, boy, could you run. Yeah, you bathed and showered in platitudes. Some kids show no gratitude. And now, Jamie, your head won't fit through the door. Attacking midfielder, age 24. You were nothing before we met, and I won't let you forget that I picked you up for free. And you showed your thanks by leaving me. Oh, Jamie, why can't you see these tears fall from my eyes? Because you're computerized. 'Cause 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 you're compute computerized. Well, we've started to lose, so I've turned to booze. I could really use your skills back at the club. Well, I'm pretty miffed because you don't exist. You're just a name on a screen and I'm relegated to the pub. You got too big for your boots, forgot your grassroots. Yeah, you used me and left me alone just like all the rest. You were the only god in my depleted squad. Now there's nobody here except me, I am bereft. Yeah, you bathed and showered in platitudes. Some kids show no gratitude. And now, Jamie, your head won't fit through the door. Attacking midfielder, age 24. 'Cause you were nothing before we met, and I won't let you forget that I picked you up for free. You showed your thanks by leaving me. Oh, Jamie, why can't you see these tears fall from my eyes? Because you're computerized, computerized. Because you're computerized, computerized.